I've decided that in addition to the normal podcasts, the ones that talk about, well, at the moment, Spinoza and soon to be Kant and Schopenhauer, I'm going to produce two other kinds of podcasts, one of which will probably be called ancillary. Um, they address, I suppose, peripheral issues or just things that you might be interested in. The first one you may well be interested in because it's about business and Gurdjieff's Law of Seven. And also what I will call minutiae. Very detailed analysis of statements of Spinoza and Kant and Schopenhauer. The reality is that you cannot just read Spinoza. You have to ponder on it and meditate on it, if you want to use that word. I once knew a professor of philosophy. He was a German, and his speciality was Kant. I knew him for a few years. He was the happiest man I've ever met. Wonderful man. Unfortunately, I'm not in contact with him now. He was dating my sister, and when that blew up, then the contact ended. But anyway, one day he showed me his study. He didn't take anybody into his study, but for whatever reason, he took me into his study. And it was kind of done out like a medieval room, not fully. He had modern things in there as well, but his edition of Kant's Critique of Pure Reason was on a lectern. You know, a kind of wooden thing that held the book at reading level when you were standing, and he used to stand to read Kant's critique, and he said it helped him concentrate. You know, that way his mind didn't wander so much and he could focus more. A bit extreme. You know, my study isn't like that. My study looks like a bomb has just dropped in it. Always has and probably always will. But it illustrates the attention and the focus that's required to work with these things. And with Kant's Critique of Pure Reason, everybody says all the commentaries at the beginning of the books and all the rest of it, they say each sentence is a book. It's that dense. So anyway, to get back to the main point, so there will be ancillary, and this is the first one, ancillary podcasts and minutiae podcasts in addition to the mainstream of, you know, general coverage of these people and their works. You don't have to listen to these if they're not of interest to you. You'll get the normal ones anyway, but I'll tag them as either ancillary or minutiae. Anyway, this first one is about Gurdjieff's Law of Seven. Now, yeah, a word of warning here. If you go diving into Gurdjieff's work, you will get lost. It's the universal condition that people find themselves in when they go diving into the Law of Seven, the food diagrams, the Law of Three, Heptaparapa Shinok, which is just another word for the Law of Seven, and you know, so on and so forth. The Enneagram. But there are some useful things you can extract. And so I'm going to go through this Law of Seven at a fairly superficial level, but just show you how it worked in my life, particularly in connection with my business. Now, the way my business started was I was in the IT industry, and I just wrote a book. It wasn't a very big book. I just wrote a short book about a particular thing, and I advertised it in one of the trade journals, and hey presto, people were buying it, and not just small numbers either, quite large numbers of people. And these books weren't cheap, even, you know, 30 or 40 years ago, whenever it was being sold for about $300. And I had a business partner who was the person who introduced me to Rena Hans, actually, and he was an intellectual, a very bright man, and he helped me get the business going in terms of the operational aspects of it. And we produced another report, and hey presto, it sold even more, and this one was selling for about $600. Today's price is probably about $1,000. And we just thought, well, we're going to be millionaires by Christmas. And it didn't happen like that. So in terms of Gurdjieff's Law of Seven, and you can see on the little diagram there are 8 notes from do to do. This is the way it's usually represented, a series of notes. And there are 7 intervals between those notes. And when we start anything, things seem to go swimmingly well for the first however long, and then we hit an obstacle. And the obstacle changes the course of the business, or well, if we're talking about business, about the change of course of the business, or whatever it is you're doing, even washing your car. And then there's a change of course, and then we go through 4 more notes, and then there's another change that happens near the end. For people who understand music, these intervals are larger than the intervals, the ones where the diagram bends. The intervals there are larger than the intervals that exist between all the other notes, and so they have to be filled in some way. Now there are 2 approaches to this. The approach I took was to simply say, well, actually these bends are going to happen, and I'll go with the bends. Now in the Gurdjieff work, the standard understanding of these things is, well, when these obstacles occur, we have to find some resource that keeps us on the straight path that we wanted to be on. In my opinion, that is pure nonsense. It is to be stupid. The laws of the universe are far stronger than our own individual efforts, as you will probably know now from the study of Spinoza. There are infinite things that can happen that divert us from our intended course. So my business went happily along on Do Re Mi, and I and my business partner were sort of getting along quite well. And then things started to go a bit wrong. My business partner wanted to bring his sister into the business, who was a professional business person, a professional publisher. This was a publishing business. And she was a spreadsheet jockey, people who like to live in spreadsheets. During the whole course of my business, I did not allow one single spreadsheet in the business. Spreadsheets are acts of imagination. People like producing them because it gives them a sense of security and a sense that the future is somehow determined, and that they can, if they can only do certain things, then what's on the spreadsheet will happen. It's not like that. So anyway, things started to go wrong, and it got to the point where we weren't producing anything and we weren't generating any cash. And so one fine day, and there's a whole lot of shenanigans going on in the background that I didn't like. So one fine day I just went down to the office, and my partner was in there, and I just said, the business is yours, have it. He wanted it anyway. He just thought that he could run it from spreadsheets and plans and so on. And I just gave him the whole thing, the whole shooting match. I then rented a small grotty office somewhere and started the whole thing again. And so that was the first bend in that diagram you see there, when things suddenly were no longer going in a straight line. We'll produce more reports, make more money, millionaires by Christmas. And I had to start again. So I didn't try and continue with what I'd already created. I just then started going down the slopey part of that, Fa, Sol, La, Si, those 4 notes, in a different direction. Interestingly enough, my ex-business guy tried to sue me for using my own name in the business, which was a bit silly, but that's what he tried to do. That was the pitch of the relationship at that point. Anyway, so things then went very well for me. I mean, obviously there were smaller occurrences of this diagram, so sometimes you wouldn't get any business for a few months, but then you get a lot of business. And what happened was the business doubled in revenue every year for about 10 years. And so it turned into a sizable business. There was about 120 people working for me. I was getting tired of it, to be quite honest. And I thought I wanted to sell it. And I was well aware that to sell a business you have to get the so-called professionals in, the spreadsheet jockeys. Remember that this doubling in revenue every year happened without any plans, any spreadsheets. The modus operandi was very, very simple. If something works, do more of it. If something doesn't work, trash it. And the trashing it is sometimes very difficult. Someone once said, the art of business is to know when to kill your best loved children. So things went swimmingly for about 10 years. I got the professionals in, you know, the people with MBAs and degrees in finance and all the rest of it. These people were spreadsheet jockeys. The whole business ground to a halt. There was no growth. But getting these people in meant that I had a financial director, I had business plans, I had, you know, all the paraphernalia that's needed to sell a business. And when you invite the wolves into your home, they're going to rip things up, which is exactly what these people did, and I suffered quite considerably at the hands of that. Even so, in the end, it was sold, but not in the way I wanted. So, you know, here was the last diversion on this. Not in the way I wanted, and not for the amount that I wanted. I won't go into all of that. So that was how I created a business and sold it. I didn't resist the bends in the curve. I went with them. If you speak to sort of Gurdjieff diehards, then they will insist that you have to produce some super effort to keep the line going straight. This is the law of seven. The points where difficulties occur, you have to make some super kind of effort to keep the whole thing going how you wanted it. My business partner never encountered the success I had with my business. To this very day, he's still bitter about it, even though he writes books about Beelzebub's tales. And that's really what I wanted to say in this podcast. The law of seven basically says that if you set off to do anything, the thing you will end up at the end is probably quite different to the thing that you envisaged at the start. The essence of the situation is to go with the deflections, not to resist them. And that in itself is quite difficult. Most people get carried away with their imaginations, their spreadsheets, their plans, and they find it very, very difficult to kill their best loved children. So, yeah, this was the first of the so-called ancillary podcasts, and there'll be more of them as I get ideas to produce them. And I will cover more Gurdjieff as time progresses. It will always be under the ancillary label because, as far as I'm concerned, it's not mainstream. None of this stuff will really help you deal with your emotional understanding, deal with understanding life in general, and all the stuff that we get from people like Spinoza or Kant.